everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SimonsStamp.com. Today I'm going to be showing you a card made using the stamp set and some of the supplies included in the December 2018 card kit. Here's the stamp set that comes in the kit, and this is called Christmas Cheer. I'm going to start out by trimming down some watercolor paper. This is Strathmore cold press watercolor paper, and I've cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm going to be stamping the Santa image from the stamp set near the bottom of the card. I'm going to have my watercolor scene be masked off and be only a small portion of this card front. So I'm marking out exactly how big I want the actual area to be, and then I used a T-square ruler to draw in those lines. Now I didn't measure or anything like that, but it's about 1 inch from each side, 1 inch from the top, and maybe 1.5 inches from the bottom. That's roughly the measurements. I then put it into my MISTI stamp positioning tool, and in order to mask off the bottom area of my scene, I'm using a bit of grid paper from Simon, and I just have it cut down to a small piece, and I've taped that in place so it doesn't move around. I'm placing that Santa stamp, and I'm going to be stamping it in VersaFine ONYX black ink. This ink is a pigment ink, and it's also waterproof, so it's perfect for doing some watercoloring over the top. So I actually stamped the image twice. The first time I got a pretty solid image, but just to make sure I got every single nook and cranny, I decided to stamp it one more time, and that made sure that all of the lines were nice and solid. So I'm going to remove the mask off the very bottom. You can see that I have a nice clean area below my scene. And then I took some blue painter's tape and masked off the area so that as I watercolor paint around, I can paint all the way to the edges. So included in the card kit is this watercolor paper that has 4 dots of Daniel Smith watercolors on it. And I wasn't sure what the colors looked like, so I thought I better just smear them out a little bit using a water brush. So I've got a nice yellow shade, some aqua, red, and a green. So I'm going to be mixing the colors a bit so that I can get a nice flesh color for Santa's face. So in order to do that, I'm just using the back of the stamp set, that nice slick surface, and I put that white grid paper underneath it, put the back of the stamp set on top, and now I have a slick surface to mix my paints on. So I'm taking some of the red and a little bit of that yellow and mixing them together to make a nice orange shade. And I'm really diluting it down. I'm squeezing my water brush so that a lot of water comes out, and then it gives me a nice pale shade for Santa's face. And I'm going to paint in all of his face, and then I'm going to drop in a little bit more of that red shade just where his cheeks are. And I'm going to let that kind of spread out so that he has some nice rosy cheeks. I used some of that yellow shade on his list that he's looking at, and then I moved on to the red areas of the scene. I've got the hat on top of his head and also his coat, and I painted his hands a nice green shade. I added a little bit more color for the shading on the red areas, and then I diluted down that blue color quite a bit and added just a tiny bit of color on his beard and the white areas on his hat. I created a brown by mixing the green and red together, and then I put that in the mouth. And then I'm using that aqua blue shade and just painting a sky in, just dropping in some color, making sure I have quite a few different darker areas. My plan is to stamp some of the snowflakes from the stamp set over the blue areas, so I wanted to make sure that the blue areas were dark enough that the white snowflakes would show. So I used my heat tool just to speed up the drying process, but you could definitely let this air dry. And then I removed my blue painter's tape. You can see how clean those edges are around my scene. I cleaned up the pencil lines from earlier using an arch eraser. This is a really, really soft eraser, and it won't eat away at your watercolor paper. I then placed some of the snowflakes from the stamp set just around that area, and I wanted them to kind of overhang the scene. I wanted the snowflakes to go beyond the rectangle. I then prepped the area with an anti-static powder tool, and then applied some Versamark ink onto my snowflake stamps. And I actually stamped these twice. I'm not going to show you on camera the second time I stamped them, but I actually stamped these snowflakes twice, and I did that because this watercolor paper is textured, so in order to get a really good impression, I thought it would be best just to stamp it twice. For any areas where the embossing powder stuck and I didn't want it to, I used a dry paintbrush just to sweep away that powder, and then I used my heat tool to heat set the embossing powder until it was smooth and melted. To finish off the design for this area, I took the small Merry Christmas stamp from the stamp set and stamped that in ONYX black ink. At this point, I decided I wanted to use a pattern paper from the card kit, so I'm actually trimming down that watercolor piece so it's a little bit smaller than my card front. And then I took the peppermint stripe, the kind of like the red and white diagonal stripe pattern from the paper pack in the kit, and I trimmed that down to be the exact size of my card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. My card base is made out of the white cardstock from the kit, and I just trimmed that down to 4 1/4 by 11 and then scored it at 5 1/2 to create a top folding card. I adhered the pattern paper to my card front using some Tombow Extreme adhesive. Just place that right over top of the front of that card. And then in order to adhere the watercolor piece onto the card, I thought it would be easiest to use a square of fun foam. So I cut down the fun foam so that it was just a little bit smaller than my watercolor piece. And then I used some Gina K Designs Connect glue to glue the fun foam to the watercolor paper and also to the card base. So this is a pretty strong adhesive, so I didn't need to use too much of it, just a little bit in each corner, and then it just scribbled across the middle. So I'm going to press that down onto my card front, and that pretty much finishes the card for today. I love how this card turned out. It's rather simple, and you could actually create multiples of this card and using different stamped elements from that stamp set. I think it would turn out really, really cute. In fact, you could just have it be the snowflakes, and it would turn out amazing. Thanks so much for watching today. I will catch you guys in another assignment video very, very soon.